Haker Jazz.
Thanks, Dave, for taking the time.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for contacting me. I appreciate it.
You know, I saw you here in Maribor. Maybe you remember the gig in 2010 with the percussion quartet. And
oh, yeah, for sure. I
the-
remember that one well because there was a funny moment when we went to dinner and Frank Rosaly, our drummer, he talks with his hands a lot. And the waiter came over to put our food on the table, and Frank didn't see him because he came up from behind him. And so right as he walked up, he threw his hand up and knocked the plate everywhere.
okay.
And the waiter was really mad for like about a second. And then he got like contained himself again. It was really funny.
That's a nice way to remember a gig in a town, right? But cool.
Yeah, but also the venue there is
it's a nice vibe here.
Strange basement.
Yeah. But I mean, I want to start this talk, with the same band, the percussion quartet, actually, and I've listened to Harvesters, which is killing, and it's quite different in a way.
Sorry, I missed a bit of the last of that. I don't know.
Sorry.
The
No.
connection.
I wanted to ask you about Harvesters, by the same band back, actually, and it's a killing record. What's the story behind it, and how did it happen? I mean, did you decide to do it? And
so actually, starting about almost 2 years ago now, I have a friend who's been working as an organizer in France for some time, and now he's working with Le Petit Faux Show, which is a venue in Tours, France, that has been doing improvised music programming for a long time. And so he asked us if we wanted to come, and we were sort of an experiment, actually, in a project between 5 different venues in France that all present improvised music, where the concept was for all of them to really work together to bring one group over where they could tour those 5 different venues. Normally when musicians are going over, they're reaching out themselves to the venues, but so this was a different concept, and it was fantastic because it makes the touring a lot easier when you're not going from France to Germany to Denmark to wherever. The travel's a lot more reasonable. We would have done most of it by train, except they were having train strikes in France at that moment. So we had to improvise a little bit, but we made it around to, we were in Brest, Tours, Nantes, Poitiers, and oh my gosh, who am I forgetting? Brest, Tours, Poitiers, Nantes, and Tours, yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
So I mean, it was really kind of a beautiful opportunity, and actually the band's been working for almost 20 years now.
That's
this
incredible.
Was our first and the first opportunity to play in France, actually. So
wow. Okay.
So the recording was made during one of the first concerts, which was the one in Tours. Part of the recording came from that live concert, and the other part came from a workshop and recording session we did a couple days later. The workshop was really kind of a special opportunity because it was for a lot of kids who were, ranging from about 10 to 13 years old. And a lot of them were somewhat recent arrivals to France, coming from Afghanistan, Syria, Niger, Senegal, kind of a lot of different places who had settled in Tours. And, we got to connect with these young kids who were, it was so embarrassing as they're going around introducing themselves. And, we each introduced ourselves. We said a little bit about where we're from and what languages we speak. And all of these kids who are 10, 12 years old name off, 5 different languages. And the rest of us speak maybe 2. So it was really special, actually. Yeah. And then the final part of the recording came from another recording session we did in the afternoon the same day, which was kind of rare for that group because normally most of our recordings have been live recordings.
Yeah.
Really because I prefer the energy of recording in a live situation, especially improvised music. I find that the stakes are a lot higher in that situation, I think. So the playing is often better, I think, than what you find in a studio. But
yeah, definitely. You mentioned this group almost exists for 20 years. I mean, how did you? I know you and Tim Daisy go way back, I think, but like, how did you decide for this band? I mean, this particular lineup, and I know Frank is now in Europe actually, but he was back then in Chicago. But what was the idea behind 2 drummers? I mean, that's quite not so frequent. I mean, in music nowadays. So
yeah, right. So Frank Rosaly moved to Chicago, I want to say in 2002 or so, somewhere around there. And I had been working with Tim Daisy since about 1997 when we first met as, pretty young musicians at the time. We were both probably 20, 21 years old. And so we'd been working together for some time, and Frank moved to town. And I mean, immediately on hearing him, it's like, wow, this guy's really a fantastic drummer. But I heard a concert that the 2 of them did together, I think at a place called the Empty Bottle that used to have a regular series in Chicago. And, they really had a special connection because it's not all that often that you find 2 drummers who can play drum kits together and not step on each other's toes. And the interesting thing in the dynamic with them is that I think they're both, A, they're very sensitive musicians. B, they play the instrument very, very differently. And so they managed to figure out a way to really have what I think of as like a group sound with the 2 of them that's really special and unique. And so I decided I wanted to try to build a group around that. And, as often is the case, that means you book one gig and see how it goes. And with that band, from the start, it was something really different, I think, and something really special. And for me, a lot of the bands I work with are free improvising bands.
Yeah.
And the thing that makes something worth continuing is if it feels unique. I mean, you play plenty of free improvising concerts that, maybe they sound good, maybe they don't, I don't know. But, if it doesn't feel like it has a distinct personality, then it's not usually something that I'm going to follow up with to try to book more concerts. But when it feels like, this is actually something different, that's when you start making bands. And I think that's where that came from, was that it really did feel like a special and unique context.
Yeah, I know, it's really, I mean, I love this group, it's just the vibe you guys, I mean, it's like very rare, like you said, to have 2 drummers working so well together. I remember one record that Malaby did with Mike Serene and Tom Rainey, and they sound like, different vibe, of course, of playing, but also like really, you don't know who's playing what. But it's the same with Tim and Frank, actually. It's like really, like, what? Beautiful stuff. Yeah
Definitely.
Yeah, but I wanted to also ask you, but this one came again on your label, right? Aerophonic Records. And
yes. Yeah.
How did you decide to do that? I mean, because it's been running like for 10 years now already. And what was the main trigger for you going that path? I mean, many musicians have been doing it now, but
I think for me, creating the label was an opportunity to have more control over the timing of releases and how many releases I'm putting out. especially say 10 years ago, I think there was a period where there were a lot of labels involved in the music, small labels run by people who really believe in the music and really were, putting a lot of effort into it. But as time passes and the music changes, you go through these waves where suddenly there's fewer labels or fewer venues, and hopefully they come back. Yeah. But at that moment, it felt like there were fewer and fewer places to put music out. And even though there's some, you're kind of waiting in line with a lot of other musicians to put out a record. And by the time it comes out, it got recorded 2 years ago. Yeah. And if the band is still working, it's moved on completely from what it was doing when the record was recorded. And so having something, this Harvesters actually came out 3 months after we recorded it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Which is a pretty fast turnaround time. Most of them don't come out that quickly, but it's good to know that it's possible to do that. And it's great to me that, the things that I'm putting out on my label feel a lot more connected to the immediate moment of, this is actually what's happening right now. Maybe it's coming out a year after it was recorded, but I think it really is reflective of the things I'm working on and the projects I'm doing. And if I didn't have this platform, there's no way I could put out the number of recordings that I've been able to over the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's just not enough record labels out there to do it. So, yeah.
No, but it's a nice way of documenting where you are in your stage of life. Musically, that's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's, I think so many artists and musicians are doing that now and really kind of taking control of that. I think in part it's because we have to,
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's a good thing. I think it's really giving artists control over what they present and how they present it. And for me, it's been incredible also to really have direct interactions with the people who support my music and who are interested in it. Because before, maybe they're buying it from the record shop, maybe they're buying it directly from the record label, but now they're buying it from me. And I know them, we have conversations, I see them when I go to a concert in Germany or in, Austin, Texas, or wherever it might be. And, we're actually able to make these types of personal connections that are really important, I think, for the way this music works and for the community around the music. I think those types of connections are so special and important because it's not just about selling something. It's not it's not this capitalistic model of, just trying to sell people something. It's about something larger than that. And it's really about building community and making connections,
Yeah, especially for the music we play. You play improvised, and it's so important. Yeah. Do you print? Do you make physical copies of every album you release on your label, or?
Not everything.
Okay.
I do have on the label. There's a series of digital only releases.
Okay.
I did a bit of that from about 2016 to 2018. I think I did 5 or 6 digital only releases, and then during the pandemic, I did, I think, 15 of them.
Sure. Yeah.
I had this concept where I would do a weekly concert on Wednesday nights, on a live stream concert. And each week I was releasing a new record of stuff that came mostly archival things that I had, some things from 2002, 2003, some things more recent, from 2021, 2019, 2020. But the idea was that each week I was going to release a new record, do a live solo concert, and sell as many copies of the record as I could, and then just split that money with the musicians on the record, basically.
Yeah.
So it was almost like, having a gig with those musicians and being able to pay them, what I might for a gig or something. It wasn't thousands of dollars or anything like that, but especially at that time, people were really engaging in buying music from artists, which was a really beautiful way for folks to support during that time. So yeah.
Yeah. No, especially Bandcamp is a nice.
But I haven't done any digital releases since.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I lost interest in it, or there's something about doing the digital only releases that feels less permanent, and at least in my experience.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The people who follow my label don't they don't engage with the digital stuff as much, I think. The hard copy releases, they sell more digital copies than the digital only releases, if that makes sense. So it's like, for some reason, people tend to take those more seriously in a way, I guess. And it might even just be the graphic design, the fact that it's something they see at a concert, or but the physical nature of it, I think, makes it a more concrete thing that people engage with more. So.
Yeah, no, it's nice. I also prefer the physical copy. It's more personal.
Yeah.
I tend to listen more to the records I have in physical form than in digital format. It's I don't know why, but just the process of putting something in a CD player, it's like the whole thing. Okay, cool.
Totally. No, I feel the same way, even for like the way my brain organizes recordings. Like I think about my record collection and what the cover looks like and where it is on the shelf, and all those types of things. It helps me remember that it's there. Even the digital stuff that's just online, I mean, everything's online, so there's no way to, your brain doesn't really register it, I think, somehow.
No, it's true. Yeah, I mean, I have like thousands of albums on like an external hard drive, just like in digital form, and it's like I somehow don't go to the I go to the same CDs,
right?
Like okay, again, this, I don't know why. It's,
definitely.
Yeah, but
I still have a iPod from 2004 that I put a lot of my music collection on at that time, and I actually really quite like that still, because it's portable. I can take it with me. I can listen to it.
I love
it. It's funny. Like I've organized concerts for a long time, and I usually DJ at the concerts like off of that. And the younger people who are working are always like, "Wow, an iPod!" My parents had one of those. Definitely makes me feel old.
Oh Lord, no, but it's true. It's I like that. Yeah, something about it. I don't know. But speaking of,
I mean, also I don't have a Spotify or Apple.
Oh, really? You didn't put the records on Spotify?
No.
No, right? Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. I really, to me, it's like, I mean, I said it's not a capitalistic model, but actually making money off recordings or valuing recordings somehow, I think is important.
Yeah.
And putting those things on Spotify and Apple Music, I mean, I can sell one CD and make more money than I will ever make off of putting it on Spotify, for sure. And it just, I think there's something to be said for sort of forcing people to actually engage with the music and to understand that it doesn't come for free and that it does have value. So I don't put things on Spotify or Apple Music or any of that. And in the long run, maybe that means I don't get as many gigs, because presenters are looking at how many listens you have on Spotify and that kind of thing. But honestly, I don't care. Just
I agree. Yeah, it's I think I've read the other day an article like that a musician wrote, for one album that we sell on Bandcamp, you would need, I think, 30,000 plays on Spotify, which is insane. That's like, for this kind of music, that's like,
it's not going to happen.
No, exactly. I mean, for one, that's crazy.
And so if one of those 30,000 people decides to buy a record, you've been compensated better than you would be otherwise. So if 10 of them decide to do it, wow.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. Yeah. But it's good that these forms, this Bandcamp that exists now, like in the last few years, because it's really a artist-friendly environment. So that's fantastic. I mean, that's quite cool.
This is true, although I would also say I'm definitely wary of Bandcamp. I think I do sell music on there, but like any company, they're a company, and they just got sold a year and a half ago to a Chinese video game company.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And, during the pandemic, everybody was very impressed with their Bandcamp Friday model, where they gave, the entire sales to the artists. But to me, that was just honestly a very, very smart way of marketing themselves, because suddenly you had thousands of musicians all over the world, if not more, saying Bandcamp Friday once a month. I mean, it was the best money that they could have spent on marketing. I don't really think it was a charitable gift. It was a very smart marketing move on their part. And they built their market share up enough to the point where they could then sell the company to a Chinese video game developer. So, I mean, these are the trajectories these things take. And so I'm a little bit agnostic on how that's going to play out over the long time.
I mean, hopefully something pops up again that's going to be improvised music friendly. I'll put it like that. Right. But
I mean, okay, to be fair, it's also a place where the people who are hanging out on Bandcamp are very engaged with the music. Many of them are buying the music, which is fantastic. I mean, it is a good way to support artists, and particularly for artists who don't have the time or to run their own record label in a way that makes sense for them. It is a really good place for them to get their music up easily and be able to make some money off it, and that is important. So to be fair,
no, it's at least something. But Dave, I wanted to ask you just to go a little bit back. I mean, you said you're old, but not really. But like I guess early 90s or late 80s. I just wanted to ask you this question: what was the moment that you decided to go for saxophone, or especially like jazz or improvised music? I mean, did you hear a particular record? I mean, or what was the moment, if you remember?
It's interesting. For some reason, I mean, I started playing saxophone when I was 8. So that was like 1980, I think it was 1983 or 84. 1984, I started playing saxophone. And, I don't know why from the beginning, I was just fascinated by the instrument, like from the first time I saw it, like, and especially when I remember we rented a saxophone so I could take some lessons. And I remember opening the case. I didn't know how to do anything with it, but I just remember taking it out of the case and being fascinated with this thing, this object, And from the time I started playing lessons, I mean, I loved the thing from the beginning. My grandfather was actually quite a big music fan. I mean, he really liked classical music a lot, but he was also a huge jazz fan. I mean, he loved Ellington and Count Basie, Art Tatum, Coleman Hawkins. And so as soon as I started playing, like, he gave me a cassette with a Coleman Hawkins, best of Coleman Hawkins on one side. My uncle gave me a cassette with Charlie Parker, the Verve master takes on one side, and John Coltrane live at Birdland on the other. And so, I didn't really listen to those things for a few years, probably until I was about 12, 13. And then I started listening to those things and then playing in jazz band at school. And, all the people who really invented the saxophone are jazz musicians. I mean, there's no other music where saxophone is like used in such an incredible way. So I mean, even from the first time hearing Charlie Parker, it was like, oh my, how do you play like that? You know?
Yeah.
But getting into the more out stuff, you know, by the time I was in high school, it was really like kind of a logical path of, you know, I was playing these tunes in a little jazz combo that I was in, but, you know, listening and playing like Thelonious Monk tunes and Miles Davis tunes and Charles Mingus tunes, and, you know, things that are, you know, it's logical to be playing those things, but then you actually go and listen to those records to hear what they sound like. And, you know, you learn about Cannonball Adderley and John Coltrane. And so, you know, I just started following those paths through all the other people on the records to say, well, wow, I really love this guy and I love this. And, you know, following Coltrane, I think, was the first place where I started to get into some more out stuff, you know, the stuff from Village Vanguard in '61 with Dolphy and those bands. And then following his career, you know, through to the end in '67 and really, you know, discovering that music. And then also, of course, discovering like Dolphy, Ornette Coleman, you know, for me, those were the first kind of more out things that I heard. And they very much from the beginning, I really connected with them. I think Dolphy in particular, I think was just, and Ornette as well, you know, were just two things that made so much sense to me, you know. And so.
Yeah, so for me also, when I heard Ornette, you know, the Atlantic recordings.
Yeah.
I was like, man, you know, you can play ahead and open it up. Damn, and you can still play melodic, you know, without sacrificing the melody. And I was like, man, that's incredible. Yeah.
Completely.
How did you then, like, you know, I have you on so many records at home, and for the first time I heard you was like with the Ken Vandermark 5. So, but like, what was the process for you, like integrating in the Chicago scene, especially like, I guess, mid-90s? And I've spoken now to quite so many guys, you know, from the Chicago scene, like, and there seemed to have been like a huge revival of especially improvised music. I mean, Chicago has obviously a huge history, but especially like mid-90s, something was happening. How did you experience that and, you know, entering the scene and meeting Ken and all these things? How did that go for you?
Yeah, sure. You know, I'm 10 years younger than Ken, for example. And so I think I came to this music at a time when all those things were really kind of underway. Oka Disc, this record label that Bruno Johnson ran, which, you know, a lot of Ken's music came out on there. But, you know, these connections were starting to be made between younger players on the north side of Chicago and a scene around Hal Russell and NRG Ensemble, which had been around, you know, from the 70s and had been active and keeping this thing happening on the north side while all this stuff was happening on the south side with the AACM. And I think in the early 90s, the scene started to connect a little bit more and to cross-pollinate a little bit more. And you had somebody like Fred Anderson coming up to play like the Lounge Acts, which was a rock club, you know, a pretty important rock club in the 90s in Chicago. And then Ken Vandermark and John Corbett started organizing concerts on Wednesday nights at the Empty Bottle in 1995. And, you know, I think that series really did an incredible job of bringing together not just people in Chicago, but bringing in all these visiting musicians from around the US and around the world. And for me, that was really the place alongside the Velvet Lounge, which was Fred Anderson's club, where, you know, I really started to experience all this music in amazing ways, and also to see these different scenes start to interact, you know, like, I mean, seeing Von Freeman play with Misha Mengelberg and Han Benek, for example. You know, I mean, just these amazing groupings that it's like, yeah, this could not happen anywhere else. So that, you know, there was so much incredible stuff happening like that. And then, you know, as I was coming into that, I was also sort of coming into my own as a musician. And I had just I graduated from college in 1997, and at that point really started. I had a period in college where I dropped out of music school and just decided, like, okay, I guess that's as far as the music thing is going to go for me.
Oh wow! Okay.
Like the way things were sort of presented or something, or it just felt like, okay, well, I hated music school, so I guess that's the end of my music thing. And I was really interested in the time in anthropology and ethnomusicology. And I studied in Ghana for a year in my junior year of university. Wow. Yeah. And when I was there, it was like, all these people were participating in music in so many different ways. I mean, the university there had a music department and I was taking classes, but the real scene was just outside of the music department, in a grove of trees between the main road where the bus stop was and the music school. And all these musicians from all over Accra, which is the capital, would meet up there. And people would teach lessons, people would hang out and play, people would, so it was like, I mean, it was really a scene. And that was kind of the place where I really got re-inspired to play again, because, all these people are like, wow, you play the saxophone. Because there weren't a lot of saxophone players there. I mean, there were some, and there was definitely a history of great horn players and high life bands and all this stuff. But, I was sort of a curiosity basically for all these people. And so I started getting asked to do stuff. And, it made me feel like, man, if I can come halfway around the world and these people are like interested to hear me and work with me, like, I should be doing this at home. So when I got back, that's when I really started seriously practicing again, and especially in like rock band, playing all these that had nothing to do with school. Had to do with like actually educating myself about music, and not school stuff, but like actually doing it basically, and realizing that that's what musicians have always done. It's not about school. Maybe in the classical music world, you have to have that type of pedigree, but otherwise, it's on yourself to educate yourself and to get involved and to make things happen. And so by the time I got out of school, I was like, yeah, I'm going to try this and see how far it can go. And I mean, somehow or other, I still am not sure how this worked out, but I asked Ken Vandermark for a few lessons. I took a few with him, and right at that time, Mars Williams, amazing saxophone player, very good friend. I mean, I didn't know him at the time. I didn't really know Ken either, but Mars was so busy with all of his projects that he couldn't do Ken's band, Vandermark 5 anymore. And I'd taken a few lessons with Ken, like 2 or 3 when this happened. And Ken thought, well, I've got this 22-year-old kid who can play. Like, I mean, he's not a fully formed musician by any means, but he's somebody who can commit to this band and go on tour. He doesn't have other commitments. And so he asked me to audition for the band. And, it was like an incredible opportunity for me. I mean, I think it took probably a couple years before I really felt like I was anywhere near a level to be playing with those musicians, as gracious as they were at the time. And, being older now, I think I understand also, like, yeah, I mean, that's just how it works. Like, we all work with people who are better than us and who aren't as good as us. And that's part of the process of being a musician and teaching and learning, and no matter how good somebody is technically also, for example, there's tons of ideas you can learn from young people, and energy, and so all these things are super important. And I think Ken is somebody who's always understood that and still understands that. Like, looking at his bands now, he's still bringing in tons of younger musicians, and I think that's a very cool thing, actually. But so anyway, so that's how I started really getting into the scene more, was that. So yeah.
How was it like touring with that? I mean, I know Ken played like that band played like 100 concerts a year or something like that. How was that first experience for you, you know, going on the road like as a jazz musician, 23, 22 years old?
I mean, it was very exciting for sure, you know, to show up in places where people wanted to hear you for some reason.
Also in Europe, right?
And there were audiences there, and
yeah,
I mean, so I joined the band in March, I think, of 1998, and you know, one of the most important things about the band wasn't just that we were touring; it was that we had a weekly gig in Chicago every Tuesday at this place called Empty Bottle. And so the band was rehearsing all the time. I mean, at least once a week we were rehearsing. We had a concert once a week where we could work on the music. And then we were also touring, you know, by probably 99 or 2000, we were touring like maybe a month a year, you know, and maybe after that it got up to like 6 weeks even in some years. But so the regular process of rehearsing and performing and then going on tour as well. I mean, things get better when you put the work into them, you know, and it's very rare as a musician, especially in this kind of music, you don't have ensembles that pay people to rehearse. I mean, the money's just not there for it. So a lot of times the way things come together is a project comes together for 4 days, you have 2, maybe 3 rehearsals and a gig, and you record it, and then you try to make a week-long tour next year.
Exactly.
And, you know,
exactly.
And it's very sporadic. It's very, you know, so to have a group of mostly younger musicians where people were willing to make the commitment to rehearsing all the time and to really working on it was an incredibly special thing for sure. And, you know, I mean, you look at any of the great bands over time, whether it's Duke Ellington or John Coltrane's quartet, the way they got so good at what they were doing is that they played all the time. You know, it wasn't just a band thrown together for a recording session or for one concert. And that's what really sets them apart from, you know, bands or recording sessions with so many other great musicians. But having a working band is really, really a special thing. So,
yeah. Well, you've been doing it also. I mean, right? Like we talked about the percussion quartet, and it's basically, you know, almost 20 years. That's a very special thing, you know, so important.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays that band doesn't meet so often, unfortunately. I wish it did. The Harvesters record that just came out, I mean, especially because of the pandemic, we hadn't done anything in 4 years, basically. So that was a special opportunity to come back together, but it's also a free improvising band. So, you know, we don't get together to rehearse. Like that context is kind of more about, you know, what's changed, what's new. I mean, all the musicians in that band, people are going down very different pathways now than they were 20 years ago.
Sure.
And so to bring that back together and see what happens, it's kind of a gamble of like, is this even going to work anymore? You know, but so far it has, I think. So,
No, but when you began playing with Ken, you know, I mentioned so many records I have you on. You started working with all these different bands, which were kind of co-led by you, or, you know, the Engines and Ballister and Triash and all these things. Like, how did all that start to happen for you? You know, like, were you the guy who was like really taking over the initiative, or in all these projects? Or
I mean, I would say most of the bands that I work in that don't have somebody else's name on them, I do end up being the person who books a lot of, you know, books the gigs and, you know, books the tours and makes those things happen. I mean, for better, for worse, I drink a lot of coffee in the morning and start sending emails out.
Sure.
So, and so, you know, things come together that way. It's a good way to force yourself, you know, maybe I'm not sure if I want to do the tour, but then I sit down one morning and send out 4 or 5 emails and start getting responses, and it's like, okay, we're going to do a tour.
I'm the same, man. I'm the same. That's terrible.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as you start sharing those ideas with other people and asking them about it, then you start almost like having these commitments to follow through on it, you know. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you see you know, the Chicago scene? You've been present now like for 25 years on the scene, and you know, when I check the records you've done recently, so much different projects, you know, with Joshua Abrams, the one, and Tamika Reed, and you've done one with Mark Feldman, which I really love. And you know, Mark coming to Chicago, I think that's also for you guys, I guess, an interesting wind. But like, how do you see the Chicago scene nowadays? I mean, like compared, let's say, to 25 years or 20 years.
Man, it's funny. Like whenever people ask me questions like that, you know, being in the middle of something, it's tough to have those big overview type of things, because, you know, if I was here 25 years ago and came back 10 years later and came back now, I think I could give you a better answer to that question. Being in the middle of it, you know, things change bit by bit where it, you know, it feels the same in a way. I mean, things are different now. And I will say one really important thing that, you know, I think about regularly is Fred Anderson and Von Freeman and the impact that those two people had on this city for a very long time as incredible musicians who chose not to leave Chicago, who chose to stay here and buckle down and work. You know, Von hosted a Tuesday night jam session that every musician in Chicago went to and participated in and learned from. And it wasn't just like learning to play the tunes or whatever. It was like you're at a bar that's incredibly special in the middle of the South Side of Chicago with all these characters and people who you could not cast in a movie. You know what I mean? Like a casting director could not come up with that because it's so original and so creative, and so much of what the information that was transmitted in those places was not just about how do you play the music, it's about the culture around the music and the community around the music. Because, you know, jazz music has always been about that. It couldn't afford not to be, you know. I mean, it's a larger spiritual pursuit. It's a larger life pursuit. It's just something that's much larger than just like entertaining people in a bar for money, you know. Any of the musicians who have ever been a part of this music, the reason they've made the sacrifices they have to do it is because of the sustenance that they get out of being a part of that community. And those lessons are so important. And as those places have ceased to exist over time, you know, Von passed away, I think, in 2012. Fred passed away in 2010. And what he did at and with the Velvet Lounge is something that it's impossible to convey to younger musicians. You can talk about it as much as you want, but like nowadays, when I realize it's not just one generation, there's like 2 or 3 waves of young musicians who are active in the scene in Chicago now who never experienced that. And there's ways that you can try to keep that alive and transmit it, but it's never going to be the same. And so I think that does have a fundamental impact over time of things shifting, and that may or may not be a good thing. You know, it is what it is. It's history. That's how history works in general. And, you know, to be a middle-aged person here bemoaning the fact that these kids today don't know, you know, that I think that's really boring. But there is something that happened in those places that is very important, and that hopefully somehow that information continues to filter down to younger generations, you know.
No, definitely. I mean, especially those two guys, you know, I love both of those guys, like especially Fred is such an underrated player, you know. He should be like just his sound and phrasing and everything. He was really amazing, you know.
Yeah.
Van, of course, as well. I mean, such an important influence, yeah. But I wanted to ask you also about, you know.
Yeah, I mean, both of them had incredibly unique.
Sound and phrasing. I mean, Vaughn's phrasing, man, that's like, ooh, I love it. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah.
People, you know, when I was coming up, everybody talked about Fred Anderson as if he was the really out guy, and Von Freeman was the straight ahead jazz guy. And then really getting to know both of their playing well, it was like, man, that is such an inaccurate description, because like Fred's not playing standard jazz tunes the way Von was, but then Fred in many ways had a more traditional approach to the saxophone than Von, who would do all this crazy altissimo, like freaking, and, you know, I mean, so yeah, I always found that sort of dichotomy, or I found both their playing to be misrepresented in the way people talked about them, actually.
Yeah, but definitely two players for the younger generations to think about or to listen, you know, if they don't know them. I mean, that's for sure really important.
Right.
Yeah. But Dave, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned before, like, Europeans also coming to Chicago in the 90s. And, you know, Paul Litton and all these guys, like Brötzmann comes to my mind because, you know, he passed away this year. You played with him as well. Like, what was his impact on your music? I mean, did you ever check out his music before or after you guys kind of met? Or
the first time I heard Peter on recording or otherwise was at a live concert, which was the first incarnation of the Chicago Tentet, which at the time was an octet. Yeah. And so, you know, I don't remember who exactly was in it, but it was Ken and Mars, Jeb Bishop, Ken Kessler, Fred Lonberg-Holm, Hamid, and Michael Garang.
Yeah.
I think that was the lineup, and then they added more people later on. From there, I mean, Peter was coming to Chicago so much at that time. You know, I would hear him usually several times a year, honestly. It was quite a lot. And of course started listening to his recordings more and more, you know, all the classic early stuff and whatnot. But I think for me, being in the same room with him to actually experience his sound is something like what people talk about of hearing Gene Ammons, for example, of, you know, it's something you're never going to really be able to appreciate unless you actually feel it in person. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, Peter had absolutely a huge influence on my playing, no doubt. I mean, I'm still very much interested in, to me, this kind of higher energy, higher volume type things that I think really, for me, they tie into a lot of music that deals with like spirit possession and stuff. And, you know, I mean, there's music all around the world that that explores that. And to me, pushing oneself in these physical ways into like beyond what you think you're actually capable of can really take you into these different types of mental states that I think are very interesting to explore. And I feel like that's something that Peter got at with his music. And I think a lot of people hear that as just like, you know, this sort of like raw, masculine, you know, toxic masculinity thing. And I actually don't think that's where it's coming from. I think it's coming from actually the physicality of using one's body in that way, almost like an athlete does, you know, to push yourself into a different state of consciousness. That's how I hear it, and that's what interests me about that music, honestly. So, yeah.
Interesting point. Yeah. Yeah, I also many times thought about it also, of course, obviously, you know, Machine Gun and all that was politically also, in a way, like as a act of going against it. That part was also but yeah, what you're saying, that's so true. Like pushing it to the limits. I mean, although sometimes he could sound even fragile. I know it's an oxymoron, but it's like really true.
Definitely.
You know, it's amazing. He was such a great player.
Yeah. No, I mean his ballad playing, I think especially in the last 25, 30 years, just in the 80s and 90s, I think he was just like enfant terrible kind of thing. But I mean, some of his ballad playing is so fragile. It's so emotional and so fragile and so really delicate and beautiful, actually. And I'm not sure that everybody, maybe they hear it more now, especially with some of the later recordings, like the last few solo recordings that he made, like I Surrender Dear and that stuff. But I think that was always an element of his playing, actually. But
yeah, I agree. Dave, what's on the schedule for you for this year still? I mean, already this year, I think like there are 8 records out
at the moment.
But
I mean, the things I have coming up in the immediate future, like right now, I'm doing a lot of work on Hyde Park Jazz Festival, which is a festival that I helped to organize in Chicago, which Kate Dumbleton, who's a great friend of mine, is the executive director of it. It's a festival that started as a neighborhood event on the south side of Chicago that was basically organized by a group of volunteers, mostly women who are now, getting up there in age, but they started this thing about 20 years ago as huge fans of the music. And it grew into being like really a full not-for-profit entity, which now there's, I would say, about 10 to 15,000 people who attend through the weekend.
Wow.
We have 2 outdoor stages and about 10 other venues that run based around Hyde Park, where the University of Chicago is. We use their arts center, some beautiful chapels and churches around the neighborhood, the DuSable Museum, which is a museum of African American history in Chicago. And it's certainly a very Chicago-focused festival. But at the same time, there's some incredible folks who come in. Like this year, some of the headliners are Kenny Barron playing solo, Louis Hayes Quintet, Pedrito Martinez, who's an incredible Cuban percussionist, Nicole Mitchell's debuting a piece with a classical ensemble called Dal Niente, and her trio Artifacts, which is with Tamika Reed and Mike Reed. Chess Smith is bringing in a project called We All Break. Luke Stewart is bringing in his Exposure Quintet, which is featuring some Chicago musicians. So, programmatically, it's a pretty broad range of things. And I've always worked, outside of being a musician, I've always worked basically in production jobs. It used to be, I started as a bartender working in large rock venues in Chicago, and then ended up working for Pitchfork Music Festival, which is an indie rock festival, for 10 years. And basically ended up somehow or other as the business manager for that for 10 years.
Wow, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then when I left that in 2016, I had already been doing some work with Hyde Park Jazz Festival, but now it's become kind of my main production job outside of playing music. So that comes up at the end of the month. I've got a new record coming out that we're announcing next week on Aerophonic with Farida Amadou, who's a fantastic bass player from Belgium, and Jonas Kambien, who plays piano and electronics. He's also Belgian, but has been living in Norway for about 15 years. That's a record we recorded on a short tour last fall, actually. So, I think it came out great. I'm really hoping to do some more work with that group in the future. Another record coming out later this fall will be the band Ballister, which is a group I've worked with for a long time, with Fred Lonberg-Holm and Paal Nilssen-Love.
Fantastic.
We're putting out a vinyl release on lovely pink vinyl that I just went to see get pressed a few days ago, as a matter of fact.
Oh, okay.
So that'll be coming out in the fall, and we're going to do a European tour next March.
Oh, wow, beautiful. Okay.
And then touring wise, this fall I've got once Hyde Park is done, I'm going to be doing a duo tour with Tashi Dorji, a really fantastic guitarist based in Asheville. We have a tour in the southeast in October, doing a concert with Tamika Reed and Josh Abrams at Edge Fest in Ann Arbor a little bit later in October. I'm organizing a special duo concert with Mars Williams, the saxophonist, at a chapel here in Chicago on October 22nd.
Beautiful.
And then I head off on tour for in Europe for about a month with several concerts with a drummer from Belgium named Nico Schiefe. Then a project with Christoph Kurtzman, who's a great electronics and I wouldn't say vocalist, but from Austria, and that's a project with Ken Vandermark and Katinka Klein and Leah Cole, who are both amazing cellists from Chicago, and a younger drummer named Lily Finnegan. So that'll be about 7 or 8 concerts with that group, and then at the end I'll be doing a solo concert in Poland and a duo concert with Gabby Flute Mogul, who you probably know from New York. So in Berlin. So yeah.
Okay.
And then back to Chicago for December. So
that's
so those are kind of my upcoming things. Yeah.
Wow. That's super super busy.
Yeah.
Jesus. Okay. Fantastic. That's great. Well, looking forward to the new Ballister one actually. I love that band.
Yeah, man.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I have to say I'm quite happy with the recording. I think it's a really nice set. It came from this Catalytic Sound Festival last year in Chicago last December. So yeah.
Wow, amazing, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Dave, I'll let
and
you.
Hopefully I'll make it back to New York one of these days, man. It's been a while.
Yeah. I'm in Slovenia, so I'm in Europe. Otherwise.
So you are okay. I wasn't sure. It seems like you split your time, yeah.
Yeah, a little, but now I'm mostly here. You know, especially after COVID. It's I don't know. Things change quite a lot.
Are you in Maribor then?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's why I started this talk with Maribor. You know, I remember like all the Chicago guys.
Yeah. I mean, I see the right. I see the Satchmo poster behind you there, so
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, we played there with Ken, like, man, probably
I know
2000, 2001.
2001, I think it was. Yeah. That's beautiful, yeah. That's not working anymore, but unfortunately, but
yeah, that was familiar.
Fantastic club, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but hope you make it again. Yeah, to Slovenia would be nice.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it would be amazing to get back.
Yeah. Sorry, you wanted to ask something?
Cool.
But...
Oh, do you see David Braun at all?
Yeah, we see each other every now and then. So I'll tell him to say hi, definitely. So.
Okay.
You should drop him.
Say hello for me.
Drop him a line for the Ballister tour.
Yeah.
He might do that.
Yeah. Right.
You should
maybe I'll reach out. That would be great.
Oh, you should. He loves Fred and you and
cool.
You know Paal. So definitely you should send him an
email.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go do that
now.
A few minutes actually.
Yeah, exactly. But cool. Man, Dave, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And
yeah, thank you. I likewise. Nice to chat with you, and I hope we'll run into each other again sometime soon.
Yeah, in person over a beer or something. So
yeah,
cool.
Exactly.
Cool, man. Take care. Have a nice fall and successful all the gigs and everything. So
same to you. All right. Thanks, Damon.
Thanks. Bye. Ciao.